Good afternoon. I'm Chloe Rigby, editor of InternetRetailing.net, and I'd like to introduce you to today's webinar, The Journey from Data to Shopping Experiences, Making AI Work for You. Over the next hour, we'll be hearing from Peter Thomas, CTO, and Chintan Gupta, Product Manager at Attract, as they share their experiences working with some of the world's leading retail brands and provide practical advice and insights into how to reassess and reset your AI automation strategy so that it starts with data and ends in ROI. Let me tell you a little bit about our speakers today. Peter Thomas is Attract's Chief Technology Officer. He's a firm believer in people being the real power behind the technology, and his main responsibilities include product development, leading innovation teams, and driving key collaborations to ensure that the best services are delivered to clients. In her role as product manager, Chintan Gupta helps Attract clients use smart data to make better decisions, and she leads Attract's actionable insight strategy, including machine learning algorithms. Attract works with more than 240 of the world's leading retail brands through its Fred Hopper Discovery platform, driving relevant and inspiring e-commerce experiences through personalization, search, recommendations, internationalization, and merchandising software as a service solutions. If you have a question or need something clarified as we go along, then do ask and we'll try to answer at a good moment. But at the end of today's webinar, we'll move into a Q&A session. So let me explain how to ask any questions you may have. On the control panel on your screen, you'll see a chat box. Send your question through that and we'll aim to get to as many questions as we can today. The session's recorded, so a reminder that after the webinar finishes, we'll be sending out an email with a link so that you can watch it again whenever is convenient for you. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome our speakers today, Peter Thomas, CTO, and Chintan Gupta, Product Manager of Attract. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you for the introductions, Chloe. Hi, everybody. I'm Chintan Gupta here, Product Manager at Attract. And welcome, Peter, to the webinar. Can you share what the agenda is for our webinar today?
Yes, let me talk about that. So thank you, Chloe, thank you, Chintan, and welcome, everybody. Really, we're looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning and its role in merchandising and creating excellent shopper experiences. You know, if artificial intelligence is the idea of machines being able to carry out tasks in a way that we would consider smart, then machine learning is the idea of giving machines access to data and letting them learn for themselves so that they can actually help accelerate the benefit that we can actually deliver to shoppers through the teams. So as we actually get into that, before I share the agenda, could we just actually have a quick poll? Chloe, could we actually find out how much does AI assist our audience in their jobs today?
So you should now be able to see on your screen the poll. The question is, does AI assist you in your job today? There are 4 possible answers. I don't think so. I think it does. Not as much as I would like, and of course. I'll just give you one more moment to complete that if you'd like to. And now I'm going to close the poll and share the answers. So as you can see, 28% said they didn't think so. I think it does, 17%. The biggest category is not as much as I would like at 39%, and of course at 17%. Peter, do you want to have a word about that, or shall I close that now?
Yeah, actually, so that's really interesting. So that actually shows the sort of stages of adoption that we've got. Actually, I'll talk about the agenda and then we can look at some of the trends because that correlates pretty well to what we've been seeing. So I'll start out by just talking about some of the industry trends that I've been observing. And then I want to talk about AI as a colleague. This is an interesting theme. Some people fear that having AI as part of their toolkit actually means that they're handing over the control to a black box. And actually, we're really going to be talking about how that's not the case. I'm going to talk about a number of building blocks that you can use to create a shopper experience that can be powered and accelerated by machine learning. And then once we've gone through those, we can talk about how you're going to manage this new member of your team, figuratively speaking, in order to make sure that you've got a way of learning and adapting, and also a consideration of security and privacy from the point of view from shoppers, because we know that internet privacy and security are a very important thing. How are we going to take that into account as part of the experience?
Thank you, Peter. I'm curious to learn more about the industry directions. Do you have any interesting insight that you can share?
So if we look at, as of 2017, we can see actually it's an interesting awareness already of what AI is going to contribute in terms of personalization. And by 2019, you can see this information from Gartner is saying is that it's going to be a very dominant part. Really, I think there's a realization that its ability to aggregate and transform and apply data is going to be the most important thing. It's because you can only personalize with what you know about your shoppers. So if I look at in terms of artificial intelligence directions, you can already see that by 2020, there's an expectation there's going to be a very substantial use of AI within digital commerce organizations, increasing into 2022, where in fact the trust in the technology will have increased to the point where it's actually initiating and actually controlling the interactions to a very significant amount. So if we then look at what does this mean in terms of the trends? The trends that we're observing are, for example, Internet of Things. Most of our consumers have got devices in their hands that are already incredibly powerful, that actually give them the ability to make choices for themselves. It's no longer true that the retailer is in control of the experience. Shoppers have choice, and that's through the Internet of Things. We will see the digital experience extend in store as some of the online technology becomes an effective part of the in-store presentation as well, effectively merging the experiences between online and in-store. Mobile, everyone carries one, so from a retailer's point of view, you're living in your customer's pocket, and that's actually a really interesting change in the relationship. When I talk to some of our customers now, what we're finding is that anything from 60% upwards, even as much as 85% of their commerce traffic is already on mobile. So it's already a dominant mechanism for rolling out. And you need to think about the presentation on mobile maybe a little differently from the way that it's presented on desktop, for example. Social clearly is a way of influencing opinions because of the exchange of views. And ultimately, we kind of do need to think about what's the role of marketplaces such as Amazon or the emerging Google, if you like, importance in terms of SEO. If we look at consumer trends, then probably data privacy and security is one of the most important. We just recently had GDPR introduced, and that's having a major effect. It's changing behaviors on the part of retailers and other websites. But is that a good effect for our customers? Is it creating the real transparency that they need? It gives them rights, but rights don't necessarily mean that they've actually got the kind of engagement and trust that they need. Cross-channel shopping is another interesting angle. It's like the conversation doesn't end on the desktop, it needs to extend onto the mobile and other forms of interaction. Wouldn't it be great if you were connected from the online experience to the in-store experience? And that doesn't happen much at the moment. And then that also ties into shipping and also the personalization and diversity. Why do I say shipping? Is because from a customer's point of view, the conversation about buying something doesn't end at the payment. It ends at the successful delivery. So it's about that end-to-end user journey all the way through the conversation. How does that affect us in terms of our core domain, which you could think of as search? because one of the challenges we've got increasing diversity, increasing choice, increasing amounts of data about our shoppers. And as merchandising teams, it's really hard to actually cope with that volume in order to provide a quality merchandising result. So this is where self-learning search, personalization through AI, chatbots and digital assistants, integration of new conversation techniques like voice and image are all important ways of actually being able to enrich that conversation in order to make the merchandisers more productive and deliver a more engaging experience. So just if we look at the future trends, this may seem a little fantastic, but in actual fact, most of the devices that we have currently are already equipped to actually deal with additional signals, tone of voice, scanning of items through the camera, mood, actually what your reflexes and responses are, and also what your facial expressions are. These are going to be things that we'll need to take into account. They're going to be inputs to the algorithms that actually drive the experiences in the future, and it's important to start thinking about that now.
Does that mean artificial intelligence is a colleague?
That's definitely the way that I think about it. I love this quote by Stephen Hawking. A super intelligent AI will be extremely good at accomplishing its goals, but it's a bit of a problem for us if those goals aren't aligned with us. We'll be in trouble. So the way that I think of it is the merchant still needs to be in control of the strategy. They need to be defining the KPIs and the goals for the business. And then it's about effectively communicating those to the algorithms so that the optimization is towards the business goals. And so if you think of that as two simple loops, one is the merchandiser defining the strategy and reviewing how they're doing, and then you've got the AI executing the strategy and automatically learning and adjusting toward the goals that have already been set. Let me actually expand on how we could actually build some of the experiences up. So there's a number of factors that might affect the shopping experience. The first basic one is probably trends. This is popularity and historical trends. It's statistical. It's been around for quite some time, but it still actually remains quite an important uplift for most conversions on site. Then you have social behavior, which is really projecting probable behavior based on demographics. It's like, we've seen people a little bit like you, therefore we think this is what you're going to like. It's apparent personalization. It isn't driven by direct information about the individual. It's a segmentation. It's actually driven by association with groups and social collections. But then you could take it one step further and you know that you've got some specific information about the individuals. So what can you do with that? Personal preferences or data that actually refines choice. And then, of course, take into account context in terms of places, times, events, etc. That will change demand and it will change the appropriateness or the relevancy of what you present. So those are important inputs to algorithms too. And then finally, it's really about making sure that you're understanding the shopper and the meaning that is being conveyed through their language that they're using and actions. And it's important to demonstrate to the shopper that you're actually understanding and tuning in on that. And so we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. Really, this is about creating the right experience needs the right data. So let's talk about global ranking. This is obviously the simplest of all the algorithms, and it's a simple ordering of search and navigation, and it's basically based on historical records of what has happened in the past. It could be any combination of factors that are used to weight it. It could be popularity of views. It could be margins generated. It could be a back office thing, or it could be number of purchases. They could all contribute to that. It could be the number of social connections that have been, as in the number of people that have looked at one item and then looked at another item, indicating that they view them as similar. It's a great algorithm as a fallback when you don't have any personal data, but it's actually also prone to self-fulfilling results. I was talking to one merchandiser and their comment to me was, it would be great if we just used global ranking, we would only sell black and white t-shirts. And what's important to us is some diversity and inspiration. So we need more than just a basic global ranking algorithm. So the next thing you can look at is wisdom of the crowd. And this is where you're not collecting direct personal information about the shopper, but you are collecting enough information about them in terms of their location, their context, maybe the type of time of day or something like this, which might enable you to, if you go, like, give them a digital fingerprint. And then you can match that with other shoppers that have got similar characteristics. And you can use the historical results from previous shoppers to suggest to your new shopper what they may be interested in. So it's really automatic segmentation. That could actually be enhanced by, further refining it into a conscious, deliberate segmentation, but it's the same basic principle. And that's what I call an apparent personalization. It appears to be personalized. And you can apply that to everything, actually. You could be search results, it could be to recommendations, it could even be to the navigation that you suggest. If you think about it, the navigation on your site is just a suggestion as to the next steps that somebody might want to take. It's actually a kind of recommendation. This type of algorithm is useful for returning shoppers, really. So you've seen them before, you see them again, you're gradually collecting a bit of a better profile about them in general terms, and you're able to give them some suggestions and recommendations while they still remain anonymous. So the next algorithm is really related to direct personal experience. This is data that you have about the individual. It enables you to refine their choices. Actually, this is an interesting one for me because one of the problems with relevancy, which everybody is seeking, is for a silver bullet. Because it's made up of so many complex factors that it's impossible really to find a simple solution to it. And this is where I like to flip the problem on the head, right? Let's look at all the things that are reducing relevancy. So for example, you may use knowledge of somebody's past transaction history if they're logged in on your site to actually say, well, look, they've already bought that. We don't want to suggest that again. I think we've all heard the anecdotes of shoppers who bought something online only to be endlessly recommended the same things over and over again. Well, actually, if you have that data, then why force your shopper to actually make that choice again? Remove the choice. If you have personal measurements, I know that there's a growing popularity with collecting specific shopper measurements, and there are companies that are actually specializing in matching those measurements to common brand sizes, which means that you can actually remove choice because you're actually not presenting sizes, for example, of clothes that are irrelevant. Right? You've also got information from loyalty programs that you might integrate into this algorithm because your loyalty program also suggests the type of promotions that your shoppers will respond to. All of these data points actually enable you to create relevance by removing irrelevant choices. And that's what I mean by flipping the problem on the head, is you may find that you've got more data than you realize in terms of being able to improve relevance just by actually removing those irrelevant choices. So the final, no, this is not the final one, one more. The next, if you like, layer on this personalization journey is about session intent. And this is all about demonstrating that you're listening to your shopper in terms of what they're doing now. You may have recognized them, they may have logged in, you may have all this history and all of this great data from the past to help you suggest what they may do. But if they happen to be shopping for a family member or a partner or somebody else, it could be highly irrelevant. So real-time session intent is about understanding the phrases and expressions that they're using right now to search to quickly change context and navigational choices and recommendations to tune in to what they're really looking for. And by doing that, you're actually feeding back to your shopper the fact you've heard them, that you are listening and you're actually, intent on finding them the right thing. And that's a really important connection. So that recent activity quickly outweighs the past. And that's why it needs to be real time. You need a real time strategy to actually make that possible. So the goal here is really to get your shoppers quickly to where they want to be with interesting choices.
Now that explains why you have bought this hat.
Well, I like it, and of course nobody can see it. It's a black fedora. I was actually looking for something that would be a little distinctive. And I knew I'm actually not much of a fashion buff myself. I always need somebody to help me. Didn't have anybody on this occasion. And so when I went online, I actually started just searching for general terms. But it was really interesting how I was able to tune in quite quickly through the suggestions I got to something that I quite liked. So I'm really glad. So let me bring it on to the next piece, which is actually visual experiences. And so this is where we use AI to actually analyze images and recognize the items of product that are in the image. And I think this is a really fascinating enrichment of the shopper experience. You can actually potentially upload an image and search for something and see if you've got that product available. Actually, that's quite a lot of work for the average shopper. If I watch people on the tube as I come into the office in the morning, they're often flicking away and browsing. They want convenience. They want something that gives them easy access to review a lot of information. If they were book readers, I'd refer to them as skim readers. But they want to review a lot of potential information, and they know what they like when they see it. And I think that's the power of visual recognition, is that you take the images from the product catalog and analyze them so that you can actually recognize things that are visually similar. So there is no additional typing involved for a shopper to be able to say, oh, show me the things that look a bit like that. And to continue their voyage of discovery by gestures that just involve following suggestions. Actually, another powerful option for this technology is complete the look, where the image is analyzed and broken apart into its component parts. And so somebody might say, I really like the jacket. Can you find me jeans that look like that? It could be a bundle that's actually made available by the merchandisers. But then it's also a very powerful mechanism of, if the stock levels for individual items run low, you can actually then start substituting alternative items that still complete the look because they're visually similar. Now, in some of our customers that have already started adopting this technology, we're finding that when people engage with this, their conversion rates are improving. It's actually really interesting. It's a very engaging way of shopping. So it's really about making the process of discovery simple and intuitive.
So who do you think tests and learns then?
That's something that's really interesting. I'd like to find that out. So actually, Chloe, could we actually just ask the people?
Sure. So I'm just opening that poll now. So you can see that poll now on your screen. Do you, your organisation, use test and learn? 3 options here. Yes, with external analytics and reports prepared by other teams. Yes, with reports directly built into the tools, or not yet. I'll just give you another moment to answer that if you'd like to. And now I'm going to close the poll and share your responses. So as you can see, 28% said yes with external analytics and reports from other teams, 50% for reports directly built into tools, and not yet 22%.
Thank you, Chloe. That's interesting. So we can see from that approximately 50% of our audience are using reporting tools that are built in, and 28% that are using external tools, and still 22% that are not yet using the tools. So let's talk about how to incorporate AI into your team workflow. That's pretty important. For those people that are working with external analytics, that's 28% of our audience. The turnaround to collect, analyze, and decide actions could be quite slow because a number of teams might be involved. And that has a direct impact on the A/B tests and the KPIs that you can design and influence because of the time frames and the turnaround that's actually required in order to actually get results and take action. The benefit of having reporting tools directly integrated with your tools is it makes them directly available to the merchandisers, so there's almost immediate feedback. And with that immediate feedback, it means that the KPIs that you choose, the lengths of the tests, and the goals that you're trying to optimize can be much finer grained. So it gives you more control over what you're trying to drive as a business goal. That also means that you can be a lot more experimental in the types of things that you try. You don't have to be so deliberately considered because it takes such a long time to get your results. And so that affects your test and learn methodology within the team. You can be more idea driven and more creative. So as a prerequisite to being able to succeed at this, you also need, with AI, to have a very simple and fast way of being able to set the goals for your algorithms in order to drive them to the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And some people find that with existing AI techniques, that can be quite difficult to actually retrain or redirect an algorithm. It can actually take some time for it to change course. So a part of selecting the algorithms and the technology that you use is actually also looking at how well qualified are they for a test and learn methodology, just as you might interview a member of your team to figure out whether they've got the right skills and capabilities. So without this ability to direct, you have a lack of agility in the experimentation that you can take part in or drive. Once you've got these things in place, then something else that's really important is also to make sure that you build a regular routine for your team, because it's about regular practice and it becoming something that is a normal part of working life that actually really drives the benefit from optimization strategies. If it's something that you do sporadically or infrequently, then you don't get the consistency of the comparison and a true deep understanding of whether you're actually impacting the KPIs. So for the team to learn from the system and to understand what's happening, it's actually very important that you have a very regular, periodic and systematic way of actually refining and reviewing the results. And then just finally to say, people do talk about A/B testing. Multivariate testing is just a variation of that enables you to compare alternate strategies in parallel. It just splits the traffic in more ways and allows you to conduct more parallel experiments. So just in conclusion on this, the important thing about a test and learn strategy is it's really about incremental improvement and building the team experience at the same time as optimizing towards the goals that you have for the business. Yeah, so I'll just to recap what I said about test and learn, and that is that algorithms and AI machine learning are very adept at learning at a high pace. And so really what we're saying with test and learn is actually the experiences our clients working with AI as part of the shopper experience is that it's very important to actually adopt a team methodology which also reflects review and adaptation, so that you have business KPIs that are well defined, that the team is working towards, and you also have worked out how that maps on to the metrics or KPIs, the performance that you expect from the various elements of the algorithms that you're using, so that you can actually measure their performance and respond and adapt your strategies to learn from what's actually coming back as part of the machine learning algorithms. It's actually a valuable new source of information that you have available within the team much faster than you would have previously had. And the interesting thing about getting this data live or near real time is it can give you some surprising results and let you respond quicker than you may have done, previously with some of the older techniques that people have been using for multivariate testing. But the important thing is that you develop a methodology within the team that means that you're actually looking at, what the targets are, and you're looking at them and reviewing them on a regular enough basis to actually be able to reflect any feedback and make any changes that you need to. It's a really valuable way for the merchandising team to actually build up experience themselves. It's a great feedback mechanism. So if I just look at the security aspects of it, what I was saying here is that trust and confidence are a real prerequisite for a good experience. I know that we've had GDPR introduced, and that has actually given a lot of rights to the individual shopper or user to find out what information is being held about them and to have control over that. And what we've seen is a lot of websites that are presenting the consent form in the form of, we use cookies, press OK. But what's not clear about that is exactly how much consent you're giving to how much data. Often if you look at those pop-ups, you'll find that there's a link that either says cancel or no. And when you select that, you discover that actually you get more choice and you can control how much data is shared and whether that's passed on to third parties for other marketing activities, etc. Now, for myself, I've become very distrustful of that type of interaction because by default, I'm agreeing to share everything. I'm not sharing just the data that is going to enhance my shopping experience, which is really what I want to do. So a number of the clients that we've been working with that are really tuned into this trust and connection with their shoppers, because it's a very important part of their brand, are deliberately designing their shopper experience to be very explicit about consent, so that they present right up front exactly what information is collected, exactly what it's used for, and also make it very clear how the shopper can actually revise their choices going forward. So there's no confusion about what data is being collected. It's very open, and it actually generates a lot of confidence and trust on the part of the user. So this sort of thought of, trust takes years to build, it's seconds to break, and forever to repair is really true when you're actually trying to build up a loyal shopper base. So those conclude my comments. I do apologize for the interruptions due to technical faults. Chloe, it'd be interesting, are there any questions that you received or any questions that people in the audience might have?
Absolutely. Before we do have some questions already, but if there is anybody who still has a question to ask, let me just remind you how to ask that question. You'll see the chat box in the control panel on the screen. Ask your question there, and we'll try and get to as many questions as we can today. So, first question, is AI just for big retailers, or does it apply to smaller retailers too?
I think it probably applies to smaller retailers, perhaps even more than to the larger ones, because the larger retailers can afford, the resources for larger merchandising teams. Where AI can really help is to make your merchandisers more productive and effective over a larger part of your catalogue. So I think it's actually a really useful tool for the smaller retailers as well as the larger ones.
That's great. And then you talked a little bit at the end about your experience of how you deal with data questions as a shopper. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience of this kind of technology from the point of view of the shopper?
From the point of view of the shopper, yes, I think if I'm looking at data, what I think of the data as my own. It belongs to me. And I don't mind sharing that data if I'm going to get value for it. And I think that's an important thing to think about in terms of the shopper experience, is that historically we may have thought that data is just out there and we can collect it for free and use it for what we want. But I think there's a shift in the thinking. So I think when designing the shopper experience, I like to see that the sites I visit are using the data that I'm providing in an intelligent way to help me, to make it more convenient for me, to reflect the choices that I want to make. When I find those sites, I find I'm very loyal to those. I want to go back. It's a pleasant experience. It's a trust thing. I've entrusted my data and it's being used in an intelligent way. It's actually speeding up my ability to discover and find what I want. It's not actually trying to hard sell me other things as well along the way. So I think there's a real balance to be struck there in designing these shopper experiences. And I know for me, it generates a lot of loyalty, even to the point where I may shop online to find things, but I still may end up going to my favorite sites because I trust them. So I think that's actually of immense importance, that using the data that we have available should create real value for the shopper. And if we create real value for the shopper, that will actually generate genuine return on investment.
That's great. And that brings us to a good point to wrap up there, I think. So that's the last of our questions. So I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank you, Peter Thomas, CTO at Attract, and Chintan Gupta, Product Manager at Attract, for being with us today. I'd like to thank our audience, especially for bearing with us so loyally through that interruption in the service. And we will edit the recording so that when you get it through, it'll be a smoother listen. Thank you for your questions. As always, we will follow up by email with a link to the on-demand webinar, and you can listen again to it at your convenience. So thank you all for taking part in this webcast, and goodbye.